So we have Martin Field next. He's architect at DAO Stack, and he'll be talking about building scalable Ethereum DAOs.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Matan, and I'm working on DAO Stack, and I'll tell you about the Ethereum DAO. Okay, so this is ground zero. I think that's the one common factor that unites us all. We all dearly love Ethereum. We are stake. We've built businesses on Ethereum. And, well, that's a good starting point to also face reality and ask the hard questions. So this is the situation. I think there is a growing belief that there is an increasing competition in the blockchain space. So I think if you asked me 2 years ago, I would say that there is no chance that a viable competitor to Ethereum will arise. But I think that assumption is not anymore so clear. And I think many believe that Ethereum needs to increase the pace of innovation in order to maintain its advantage. So I think there is quite consensus that Ethereum currently lacks a structure to properly support even faster innovation, both at the Ethereum core blockchain development and the ecosystem development. Okay, scalability is one particular example. Early in 2016, the estimation was that initial scalability will show up in 2017, and final unlimited scalability will show up in 2018. And now it's pretty clear that at best we're looking at 2020, 21, and possibly even 22. So, but really it's beyond just scalability. What we need, at the end of the day, we need mass adoption. And for mass adoption, we would need true killer dApps. And for true killer dApps, we would need also to solve scalability, but as well to solve non-crypto UX, gas relays, easy key management, so on and so forth, and eventually also better security solutions. Okay, so this is the situation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think still I would say that the Ethereum #1 asset, an even unfair advantage, and also the most important network effect it has, is the builders community. And in builders community, I don't mean just the community of developers that building Ethereum, but also the greater community that are building on top of Ethereum. And this is by far the largest community in the space. I would even dare to say, an order of magnitude bigger than any other community. And it's by far the most important network effect, more important than miners and users. So we need to find ways to better utilize this invaluable resource. And I think divert better energies rather than the internal dirty wars that are now on the rising with the market pressure. So let's ask the hard question. What is blocking us from faster innovation right now? So I would argue it's definitely not capital. So even if you put aside the funds that the Ethereum Foundation itself holds, if you just took 10% of mining and turned it into inflation fund, you would get $7 million a month in ecosystem development fund. And this is enormous. I would also argue that it's definitely not human resources, lack of human resource that is bottlenecking us right now. We have thousands of builders in the space, perhaps even tens of thousands. So many people are ready to work for that, and I think that's not holding us back from further innovation. So I would argue that the one bottleneck for faster innovation is decision-making capacity. So with that, try to imagine the Ether DAO or the Ethereum DAO. Try to imagine a $7 million a month inflation fund to which anyone that has an idea can apply for funding, can be quickly screened and get funded within 1 week, of course, if the idea is great. Imagine all those 10,000 Ethereans, hardly engaged, collaboratively engaged, submitting 300 proposals a day, screening all of them and finding the best one. So I'm just assuming an average Etherean will submit 1 proposal a month. Now, if you get that imagination, you might be excited, but you also might be worried because that's a lot of proposals to screen every day. and we're not sure what can do that. So this is exactly where DAOs come in. So DAOs, I would say, are good for, there is one thing that DAOs are really good for, and this is scaling up capacity while maintaining decentralization. And you can ask, but well, what decentralization is good for? And decentralization, I would say, is good for in order to maintain alignment of interest. And alignment of interest is good for effectivity and, of course, a better world for everyone. So this is a DAO, and I want to show you what I mean by scalability. So this is its agents. They shoot up proposals to the DAO, and the DAO is this machinery that turns proposals into decisions. So it objects or rejects the bad ones and automatically execute the good ones. And this construction is only interesting if that it can go from this into that. If it cannot scale the number of agents, scale the number of proposals, and number of the throughput, the number of decisions made by the DAO, it's simply not that interesting. It's not a new structure. So DAOs are open and scalable organization with the emphasis on scalable, but then the big question is, but how? How can we scale throughput in such a way? So the solution I want to propose is a holographic consensus. It's a new way to make governance, a new way to make decisions in a DAO that does provide scalability, does provide scalable DAO throughput. So I'll go very briefly about that, not with all details, but just imagine this gigantic inflow of proposals, so high frequency of proposal coming in. And in order, if you really want to screen them all, you will have to allow for local decisions. So decisions that are made by relative majority with no requirement of quorum, if you really want to screen them all. But on the other hand, if you want to have safety and resiliency, you need all of them to be actually representative. So even though they are made as local decisions by small number of people or small amount of voting power, they would need to represent the silent majority. And this is, of course, where the problem is. How can local decision made by just a few members can represent everyone else? That's a conundrum. So this is exactly what holographic consensus is about, enabling local decisions that are actually ensured to be representative of the entire absolute majority. So let me just show you very quickly how it works out. There is this inflow of regular proposals. So each new proposal enters the regular queue. Votes, voters can cast their vote, and votes are weighted with reputation. Reputation is just a nice name for voting power, without referring to what's the origin of reputation. If it's meritocratic or token locking, doesn't really matter. Now, this regular proposal require absolute majority to be approved and executed. Absolute majority means majority of all voting power in the system. And of course, they times out after some time. If nothing interesting happens, let's say after a month, they just times out. Now, the new thing is that there is prediction network. There is predictors that stake Gen, the DAO stack token, on proposals. Let's see how that works. So anyone can become a predictor. You don't need to be a reputation holder or a member of a DAO. And you can stake Gen tokens on whether a proposal will pass, we call it upstake, or fail, downstake. Now, you're only predicting what the voters will say. The predictors themselves do not participate in the decision, they just predict what the voters will decide. And then once and if there is resolution, if the voters get to resolve that proposal, then successful predictors win all of the stake of the wrong ones, and they are losing their stake. And importantly and lastly, the DAO itself, DAO stakes each and every proposal in order to incentivize the predictors to come in and start searching for good proposals. That's kind of like kicking off the game. And then there's this new thing called boosted proposals. So if and upon there is sufficient positive prediction signal, then proposals get boosted. So by sufficient, I mean that, well, you can see the signal over here. This is like the upstaking and this is the downstake. And if the total amount of upstake over the total amount of downstake, if that ratio is higher than some threshold long enough, so stably for some time, only then a proposal gets boosted. Once it gets boosted, it can be approved and executed by a relative majority. So it has like a shorter time period, let's say a week, at which people will keep on voting on it. And the end of that week, whatever the majority from those voters is, that's the decision and the execution. So this is how it looks like. Some will signal up, will get to the boosted queue, people will keep voting on them, and a decision will be made. So this is the summary of holographic consensus. Again, I missed out, I put out a lot of details, but holographic consensus, what it really does, or the way that it works, is that it's achieved by turning a social arbitrage, so a situation where active voters do not reflect well the global majority, into economic arbitrage, a situation where anyone can make a profit from identifying signaling and staying against it. So again, we try to avoid the situation. We wanted, the whole purpose of holographic consensus was to avoid the situation of social arbitrage, to avoid the situation where a local decision is made which does not reflect well the global majority. And the way we resolve from that mismatch is by transferring that into an economic arbitrage that then the market, the free market, will take care of and exploit. So I will not get into reputation, how reputation is achieved, but there are various schemes. And just to say that it doesn't really matter because the technology for the DAO that we can put up, the DAO stack itself is completely agnostic and modular and can support any governance protocol and any reputation system. I want to show you very, very quickly the interface for this DAO, Alchemy. It's an interface for DAO operation. You can go and play with it in alchemy.daostack.io. It's still pre-release. It's still many UX bugs, UI bugs, but it's working. It's working on the mainnet. It has been working in alpha for 5 months with a mini DAO of 100 people, very successfully, and now we're launching the beta phase. So actually, the DAO is live again just a few days ago. So this is, I'll just show you some pictures, and you can go play with it later. So this is like the various DAOs that you'll see inside when they launch in a few weeks. These are kind of like the proposal. You would see the regular proposal downstairs, and then the pending, those that are above threshold but are waiting to be stably so for some time, and finally the boosted ones. If you get into a proposal, you see all of its detail, the voting stats, the staking stats. There is a discussion thread on each proposal. And here you can make a new proposal. So you can write the title. Now this depends, by the way, about which kind of governance schemes you have. So right now I'm describing a governance scheme where at the end of the process you're just allocating some funds or reputation to a beneficiary. But this actually system can support any sort of decision can be made on the blockchain. Your system can eventually make any call to any other contract and maybe, for example, manage the DATCHEX platform in the case of the DXDAO that is launching in a couple of months. So you can basically put all of the details in that proposals. Yeah, and this is just showing different schemes. Your DAO may have different schemes. So this is contribution reward that I just mentioned, but you can have protocol upgrade decisions, you can have external decisions, and so on and so forth. You can see all reputation holders and many more things. So to wrap up, I would say that the Ethereum DAO, the potential Ethereum DAO, could use an inflation fund to support ecosystem development and much faster innovation. I would argue that it can actually support thousands of active contributors. I would argue that holographic consensus is here to support these thousands of proposals in a unit of time, maybe hundreds of proposals a day. And finally, that Alchemy, the interface for all of that, is ready for this experiment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. So you mentioned that you're going live in a couple of weeks. What do you expect to be the first couple of use cases?
Right, so it's live right now, the mainnet, but kind of like internally. So we have the Genesis DAO, the DAO Stack DAO testing it, and it's going live in a few weeks with a few test cases. I think the most popular one is the decentralized grant program. It's exactly what I'm describing. So Polkadot Web3 is launching this decentralized grant program. Phoenix is launching the same, and there are a few other which are more community DAOs. One of them is Psychedelic Society. Another one is Liberland. It's more like bottom-up DAOs. Yeah, and I think maybe the most complex one is the DXDAO, which is it's a DAO to control the DATCHEX platform and beyond.
In Sydney, we have a decentralized future fund, and maybe we'll consider using what you have to provide. So thank
That'll
you
be
very
great.
much.
Thank you.
Great.